The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
And welcome back to another edition of Keefer and Kurre. I'm Tony Kurre. He is Kip Keefer. His name comes first, and it should. You know what I'm talking about? The Keefer and Kurre Show.
Right.
It airs at 1 o'clock Central Time every Monday through Friday right here on TKR on Tony Kurre Radio. Super easy to find now through Android or Apple. Just put TKR in. You'll see a flaming guitar on this because we play classic rock along with 13 other shows, including Need to Know that Kip does every single week in Keefer and Kurre Show. And coming soon, our TV show, which will, of course, be seen on ABC 3340 a little bit later on this college football season. So we're looking forward to that. Kip, first of all, how you doing, brother? Everything good?
I'm really good, Tony. Excited about football season being around the corner. But I think that's one of the interesting aspects of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we're about 5 weeks out, and I'd be remiss not to mention that a lot has changed, obviously, over the last, say, 3 or 4 months, if you want to call that a dead period. It used to be a dead period in college football. Now college football pretty much 365, 24/7. A guy who is with Northwest for 26 years, Northwestern, of course, we're talking Coach Fitz, 17 years as a head coach. 5-1 in bowl games, 4 10-win seasons, 3 of those as a head coach, 1 as a player, and a 110 and 101 record overall. But he is coming off a 1-8 season and a 1-11 season overall, which I think kind of plays into the fact that he's no longer the Northwestern head coach. They're saying obviously it has a lot to do with this hazing incident, and I'm not saying it was a straw that broke the camel, but when you're coming off a 1-11 season, probably a lot of people are looking for reason to maybe go their different ways. But when you're talking about a 110 and 101 season, I just want to talk about this briefly. Pretty amazing what he's done at Northwestern.
Yeah, you know, it was shocking when the headline came down because I wasn't aware there was any ongoing investigations or any problems with that program, because from the outside looking in, this was an idyllic situation. This is an alumni, former player that became head coach, and his team has traditionally overachieved because Northwestern's not really taken seriously as a major college power, and they've made some noise. They won their division a couple of years ago. Fitzgerald was celebrated as one of the great coaching prodigies. I guess he's not a prodigy anymore. He's been there a long time, but he was a guy that was kind of recognized as a top flight head coach, and to see that he had been fired was shocking until you investigated a little bit what the reason was. And like you said, the last couple of years, their performance has been very subpar, but that could be indicative of what we've learned now is a terrible situation at a very high level academically. This is on par. Northwestern, maybe not quite on the Stanford, Vanderbilt level, but pretty darn close. And it's a traditional Catholic school. I mean, it's probably the last place you would think that would be riddled with scandal. And now it's just the talking point everywhere. I was looking on the internet this morning. There are all kinds of takes and different opinions on the, quote, hazing scandal at Northwestern. And I know we want to get into that today.
Yeah, and it's funny because it seems like this crops up about every 2 to 3 years. You don't hear anything about it, and all of a sudden there's a hazing incident. And then you don't hear about it for 2 or 3 years, and then there's a hazing incident. The NCAA defines hazing, by the way, as any act committed against someone joining or becoming a member or maintaining a membership in any organization that is humiliating, intimidating, or demeaning, or endangers the health and safety of that person. Hazing includes active or passive participation in such acts and occurs, and that means, obviously, if you've been hazed already and you're part of the hazing process. It also talks about such acts and occurs regardless of the willingness to participate in the activities, which means that even if you're willing to participate in a hazing activity, it is wrong. Hazing creates an environment, climate, which dignity and respect are absent. So I was 8 years old, and we had a tree house, right? We had the boys club. You have a boys club there, Kip?
Yeah, unofficially.
Yeah.
We didn't have a tree house.
Yeah, we had a tree house over in the Beeley's yard. It was across the street. And there were 6 of us. In order to be part of the boys club, you had to have 2 things. First of all, you had to have a bike. You couldn't be part of the boys club unless you had a bike.
If you don't have wheels, you can't qualify.
Preferably a 10-speed. You had to have a bike. And the second thing is you had to eat a worm in order to get in the boys club. And of course, that was not a problem back in those days because we would probably eat worms for free just to make our friends sick and throw up. And then I thought of one other incident where I could say that I was part of a hazing incident, and that was when I was at Lakota High School up in Westchester, Ohio, where we had high school. We had the freshman building on one side of the parking lot and then 10th, 11th, and 12th grade on the other side. And when you moved from the freshman building to the 10th grade as a sophomore, you had to make this long, luxurious 200-yard walk, if you will, from one building to the next at the beginning of the next season, and it was a ritual. I don't know how else you put it. They would make the kids, and even the teachers would make the kids, and this was not hazing. This was, hey, congratulations, welcome to the big building, right? And of course, inevitably, there was going to be a whipped cream somewhere between the freshman building and the sophomore, junior, and senior building, and there were going to be some freshmen that were going to be quote unquote initiated. We have taken hazing to an all new level, and I want to go back, and we've talked about this, and it's amazing because ESPN actually has a running tally of hazing incidents on their website. If you go to ESPN/hazing, they have well over 200 different incidences since 1980 when the first hazing incident was reported through the University of Michigan. And these are just hazing incidences where they found out about it and there were people that were disciplined or reprimanded or fired for it. So if there's 200 of them at major universities across the country, imagine how many are unreported that we don't know about. All I can think about is that a pledge pin on your uniform? That's all I can think about from Animal House. Is that a pledge pin on your uniform?
Oh, man.
A few good men. We can go on and on and on because hazing is a big part of not only a ritualistic thing between who's been over there and who's coming over here, but also this. I love the word ritual because ritual usually is a good thing. In this particular case, a ritual hazing is not a good thing. Your thoughts on that? And then I want to share a story about one Aldo Greco and what he had to go through at the University of Auburn or Auburn University.
Yeah, I would love to hear that. You're reminding me of Niedermeyer in Animal House. Yes. Accosting poor Kent Dorfman who floundered. But also
in a Twisted Sister video.
That's right. Yeah. Probably the preeminent scene from movies about hazing was Niedermeyer also wearing the underground, the hooded outfit and whatnot, like an executioner. Yeah. And Kevin Bacon in his initial role that started this whole link to Kevin Bacon being involved in what is it, the 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah. Yep.
But Kevin Bacon, as you recall, was the pledge in the snooty fraternity who was on his hands and knees getting hit by this giant paddle wielded by Niedermeyer. And he says, we are here to consecrate the ritual of obedience. And he whacked him with the paddle, and Kevin Bacon goes, thank you, sir. May I have another? It's kind of my running visual of hazing because I'm going to say with great glee and pleasure here that I completely, despite my playing sports and being involved in a lot of different situations, I did briefly join a fraternity in college, but there was no hazing ritual involved in that. On football teams, there were some weird little things that went on, but nothing that really involved me in any kind of psychological or physical or emotional trauma. So unless I join some geriatric club that runs me through the ringer and humiliates me in the next couple of years that I don't really foresee, I think I personally have kind of escaped this. But it's really hard for me, Tony, to comprehend what's the purpose of this? What's the point of it? I don't think by humiliating a new teammate or somebody that's that's a member of your team, or causing them embarrassment or pain or injury, I don't see how that's a bonding or team building experience. And so I'm really interested to hear what Al went through and what his take on all that was.
Well, and I think it is a rite of passage. And then once you get to the other side, then you feel like you've been accepted by that rite of passage. And if you don't, then you're still going to be on the team, but you're going to be looked upon a lot differently. And Kip, this is just not college sports. I mean, we talk about the Freemasons. We talk about all kinds of different organizations where, you're exchanging blood and you're giving. I mean, there's all kinds of strange things. And it goes all the way down to, of course, the rookies in the National Football League having to carry the pads of all the veterans, guys having to pick up tabs at dinner. I've heard numerous stories where they have karaoke night, which is all in fun. That's fine. You got to go up there and you got to sing a song, which for some people probably is incredibly traumatic. For some people, it's probably like, I just did it last night. So there's all kinds of different rites of passage. And again, if we want to go back to the definition of what this is, and again, it's even the willingness of a particular player and or person to say, yes, I'll do this, even though they don't want to do it. Aldo Greco tells a story, and he stands firm in that he didn't consider this a hazing, but it was a rite of passage in order to become a player on the Auburn Tigers. And of course, he was a kicker, so you can only imagine what he was going to go through down at Auburn. But at some point during training camp, he was going to be pulled out of his bed. He was going to be stripped of his clothes, and he was made to run down a long 50-yard hallway while he was pelted with bags of nickels. So he was in the middle of the night, gotten up, put a bag over his head, taken all of his clothes off, ripped his clothes off, and made him. Now, he said he willingly did this because he knew it was coming. And so it wasn't like they were ripping his clothes off. He wasn't, it wasn't clothing rape or anything. But he willingly did it. But he did mention that he missed a couple of practices afterwards because he had such bruises from these bags of nickels that he was hit with rolling down the hallway. And I greatly appreciate the fact that he even shared that story. The thing that I'll go back to, and you and I have spoken a lot about a family and about our boys on this show. One thing that I instill in all my children, and I know you have as well, that we never bow down to peer pressure. We're all different. We all do what we believe is right, and we should never bow down to peer pressure. We should never be. And I always tell my son is a good kid, and he fears authority, and I love that in it. He sees police officers, he honors them. He sees firefighters, he thanks them for their service. He sees men in their military, and he thanks them for this. And I love he respects authority, and I love that. But whenever he gets around his friends, he's stupid as a box of shit. And I'm like, dude, whenever you get around your friends, and that's peer pressure, he's trying to live up to what his friends want him to be, and he's already a great kid, a great man. And a lot of kids can learn from that, and I think we all learn from that. So when you get an 18 or 17, 18, 19-year-old kid going to college and being told that you're going to have to drink 35 purple Hooter shooters tonight or else you can't be on this chess team or this bowling team or this football team, it's just, it drives me crazy to think that this still exists, because how many more incidences do we have to have of kids dying from over drinking? In most cases, it does not end in death, but in some cases it ends with a pool cue in the backside of your rump. And I'm just like, I can't believe we're still doing this and it still exists. It boggles my mind that it still exists.
Well, I mean, let's face it, Tony, and that's probably the most disturbing angle is the sexual degree of a lot of this. And it amounts to, I'm sorry, I'm going to call it what it is. To me, if you're tied up and there was a ritual that came to light at the University of Hawaii a couple years ago when they had all of their controversy, that a ritual was to tie a naked new teammate to the goalpost and assault them with various objects in their hindquarters.
Yep.
That's rape, Tony. That's what that is.
Yep.
And I don't care, people might think that's too extreme a definition, but if you're being subjected to sexual conduct against your will, you're being raped. And I don't care if it's teammates or, a guy on the street or whatever. To me, that is just blatantly criminal and completely unfounded, unacceptable, and immoral. So, that's not a rite of passage. That's a crime.
Some people would believe that, Kip, and this is the Keefer and Kurre show. You can hear it 5 days a week here, 1 o'clock, one of our best times on TKR. I put all the shows I'm on the best times, We want to make sure everyone's listening up here, the Keefer and Kurre Show. And, of course, you can also hear us wherever you get your podcast, Tony Kurre Radio Podcast. Whenever you want to be included in a particular group, we always talk about, when we'll take it at the college level, you have, your college kids that obviously are scholarshiped and they're playing for the big football team. And then you have some type of side thing where you have a scout team. And then, of course, you have your intramural team, which anybody can be on. And to be on a team where it's all inclusive, anybody can play, doesn't feel particularly special because anybody can get on. So you want to show that you belong and you want to show that you can do something special in order to be part of this group. And I'll go back to your Animal House, Dan. We may have to sit back and watch that movie and just do a whole show on Animal House before college football season starts. But because it's been so long since I've seen it. And go show that to your 17 or 18-year-old kid that's never seen it before, and they actually think that's a riot. They think Jaws is a joke, but they'll think Animal House is pretty funny. When you're talking about that rite of passage, I just think that's a really psychologically endearing and dangerous thing for a youngster to go through. We don't have, and if you want to go to the Freemasons or some of these older organizations, we don't have, in most cases, any type of hazing incidences of adults, do we? Why do you think that is, Kip? Why do you think we don't haze a 50-year-old? It's because we're too damn smart to know that we don't want to be tied to a pole and have a broomstick stuck down our throats. It's always impressionable individuals who are trying to make an impact and be part of a rite or a ritual to move on into this group. And that's where I think it's the most dangerous because we're dealing with young minds here.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And I was interested to see where you were going, why there's no hazing with adults. But you're right. You're not going to participate because any group that requires that kind of entry procedure is not a group that I want to associate with. And I think you don't really have that ability in your younger years, that you just accept the fact that, okay, I'm going to have to be humiliated and do something that I really don't want to do. It's going to possibly cause me pain and physical discomfort and psychological damage. But it's unfortunate, and it's up to people. And again, let's get back to Pat Fitzgerald in Northwestern. This is a guy that had been part of that culture since back when he played at Northwestern. To me, Tony, if you're a coach, you're hands-on in every aspect of what goes on. It's impossible for me to believe that when you're with these kids every day and you've recruited them and brought them into the program and indoctrinated them into your system, it's impossible to me that Pat Fitzgerald or any other coach on their watch doesn't have some knowledge that this stuff is going on. And again, I'm not trying to make myself some self-righteous, saintly figure here. But if I'm a head coach at a high school or a college, the first message I'm going to convey when I come in the room for the first time I meet with my team is, I don't care what the ritual or the rites or whatever indoctrination of new guys. We're not doing that in this program.
Well, and evidently he did. Evidently he did, and that's one of those. A few good men moments where, hey, listen, we don't do that here. And then there's a little bit of a hoodwink, and it's like, okay, move on, guys, go do what you got to do. Let me ask you this, Kip: if you take those records that he had last year, 1-8 and 1-11 overall, and switch the numbers and made it 8-1, 11-1, is he fired?
I think he's probably just suspended.
Yeah,
I think he's still the golden boy, but now he's tainted. But I don't think they would have run him out of town. I think there's, Tony, the way Northwestern has fallen off the last couple of years after shockingly winning the West Division of the Big Ten just 3 or 4 years ago. I can't help but think this culture contributes to that. Maybe it's more severe in the last couple of years. But what a mess now. A lot of these players have lawyered up. There's going to be a massive suit against Northwestern, and this is going to be really damaging for their brand for years to come. That is
a great point, because I didn't even think about that. To think that maybe this culture is creating this losing culture at Northwestern is a really interesting take.
Yeah, I'm not going to feel like a special member of an elite group that you get your ass blown off every week in the games. The same people that have put you through the torture are, not performing on the field, or you're not bonding as a team. I can't see any advantage. Now, some of the sillier things, or again, for you to get in the bike club and eat a worm, that's one thing. Maybe that does create some camaraderie, but I don't see how torturing or abusing someone creates camaraderie or belonging. I think it's a negative thing, and I'm telling you, Northwestern might have a tough time recovering from this because they've got a lot of things against them anyway. Just the rigid academics to even get into Northwestern, it reduces the pool of players they can kind of pull from. And it's not exactly a high-level organization that recruits look forward to going and playing in Chicago for Northwestern. It's going to be tough for them to overcome this. I don't know where they go from here.
I never thought I'd say Northwestern would fall below Rutgers, but it's already happened. You're talking about Vanderbilt. You're talking about Harvard. You're talking about Northwestern. You mentioned some of these other schools, the Dukes. I think that's the other thing that's kind of a head scratcher here, because we think smart kids are smart for a reason. They don't do dumb things. That's why if you go look at the top 10 schools every year in college basketball, the smart schools are the ones that hit their free throws. It happens every year. Duke's always in the top 10 in free throw making because free throws win or lose basketball games. Smart kids do the right things. And I think that's the part that really surprises me. This would not surprise me at a Notre Dame because Notre Dame is it's got such mass appeal, and it's not that difficult to get into Notre Dame. If you're Catholic, you're in. At Northwestern, you have to have an SAT or an ACT score to get in, and it's very, very difficult at Northwestern. It's probably about $250,000 to get through it, too. Then to get hazed while you're there is just really surprising to me. I want to go back to one last thing before we wrap things up here. You mentioned Coach Fitz. And the buck does stop with him, but 26 years as not only a personality, a character, and a coach there. He does have 120 kids on his squad. We have assistant coaches. This is where documentation, I know people hate documentation. If you want to be a whistleblower or something's happening within your organization or your office or your cubicles or whatever, you've got to document every single thing that's happening up to a certain point. There was no documentation as we know it about Pat Fitzgerald having someone come up to him and say, listen, this is happening and I don't like it. Please make it stop. And him telling his assistant coaches, because there is a delegation of a lot of power. Do I think Nick Saban goes into every recruit's basement or living room? Hell no, of course he does not. We know he's got assistant coaches. In most cases, they're guys that are former NFL coaches, so that's just as good as having Nick Saban come through the door. But he does delegate power, and so I wonder where that delegation of power came from. Because if the Buck's going to stop when it comes to winning championships in the Big Ten, it should stop with something as, I say minimal, but in this particular case, it's not, as a hazing ritual that just got totally out of control. And I do think sometimes these things are created in fun. I think, it could start with a karaoke. It could be talked about, and I'll go back to the Junction Boys. Hell, I'll even go back to the Jerry Sandusky, Joe Paterno situation. Yes. I don't know if you want to call that a hazing incident, but you could certainly put it in the same conversation with it, that this was something as a new player. When you came in, there were shower rules. There were all kinds of different things you had to do in that organization. Did Joe Paul really know about it? I don't think Joe Paterno knew about it. I think at some point he found out about it and didn't do enough. And I will definitely say that. And should he have been fired? Absolutely. I also think it was the death of Joe Paterno.
Yes.
But I really don't think, I think it went on way too long before he actually was given any props on exactly what was happening inside his organization. And I hate that it was the last thing that happened in his life, because if it happened 50 years ago, and then, of course, he ended up riding off into the sunset, we'd look at him as a totally different animal, knowing that he did the same exact thing just 50 years ago, as opposed to being the last thing that ever happened in his life.
Yeah, he was absolutely the prototype, the most respected coach, a guy who everybody would have gotten up, taken the oath, to swear to tell the truth and say Joe Paterno is the absolute, ideal human being and worries about his players and their families and stresses all the important things. But I think you're absolutely right, Tony. I think Joe Paterno was from a generation that, sexual abuse of children was probably not anything that they had any expertise or experience or capacity to deal with. And I think Joe probably just kind of wrote it off. Probably this is not something that this is going to sully my program. And I'm just going to stick my head in the sand and hope this goes away when, actions by Sandusky demanded that he intercede and put a stop to it, at least completely bar him from access to the facility, because a lot of the abuses came during their summer camps where Sandusky wasn't an active coach anymore.
Yep.
So Joe just completely mishandled that. And it just speaks volumes to the responsibility these guys have to be more than just an individual who creates results on the field. You're the CEO of that program. You've got to oversee every detail and have a outstanding staff of people and communications open. If I was a player at Northwestern and they were doing that kind of thing, I understand that there is a big stigma of being a snitch or coming forward and making allegations, because then you could be completely ostracized from your teammates forever. But on the other hand, I think we're living in an era now where hopefully this stuff is going to die out and stop, because I think more kids are going to stand up now. And that's one of the silver linings of this coming to light, that maybe this can finally be the death knell of this kind of abuse of fellow human beings for absolutely no purpose at all. And finally, let me say one last thing. You don't know the kind of individuals that are parts of these groups. If there's a couple of particularly, dominant and sadistic kind of individuals that take pleasure in this kind of thing, then it can really get out of hand. And it sounds to me like in recent years, that's what's happened at Northwestern.
If you've got any thoughts here on what Keefer and Kurre, what we talked about here, hazing, have you been hazed in the past? What were your experiences? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Any other stories? Feel free to go ahead and drop us an email, info@TonyCurryRadio.net, info@TonyCurryRadio.net. We'd love to read your emails here on the show. And of course, we do the show every single week here, 1 o'clock of the Keefer and Kurre show right here on TKR, the TKR app. You can download it both your Android and Apple. Just put TKR, 3 easy letters, and you're good to go. And of course, you can listen to all of our great shows. We got a ton of wonderful shows. Not to mention, of course, Kip's Need to Know show, which also runs 5 days a week right here on Tony Kurre Radio. So happy to have my brother in arms and great broadcaster right here on Tony Kurre Radio. Coming up next week, we're going to be talking about, have we redlined? Is college sports, college athletes, are they on the way out? Are they dead? We'll talk about it next on the Keefer and Kurre show here on Tony Kurre Radio.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.